Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jason Rodriguez with Zpryme. Today, I'm joined by Donna Imam. She is the Democratic candidate for Congress's 31st District in Texas. Donna, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. We're very busy, obviously. We're now, less than 3 months away from the general election. Early voting is going to start here in Texas on October 13th. So things are pretty hectic.
For sure. And thanks so much for joining. As you probably know, and some might not know, Zpryme is a research and media company really focused on the intersection of technology, energy, and clean tech. And we really are thankful today to get a chance to speak with you, to let our audience know some of the work and policy ideas you have around making Central Texas continue to be a leader in clean technology, as we strongly feel, obviously, that this is a way for not just to bring economic opportunity to the region, but also equitable opportunity to the region and address some key issues such as climate change, some of the digital divide, and several other issues that are really broad. And we feel that some of the issues that you have been advocating for over the past few months really speak to that. So really thank you so much for coming to talk with us here today about those issues.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So first off, just can you get our listeners a little bit more familiar with your background and maybe talk a little bit more about why you decided to run for Congress?
Yeah, so my background is I'm an electrical and computer engineer, and I started out as a design engineer. I was the first female design engineer ever hired at Duncan Metering. And during that time, very early on in my career, all the assembly workers in my company were laid off. Their jobs were moved to Mexico, and many of them never had any option to work again. None of them had any job retraining options. And this has always left a profound impact on me. So I spent the rest of my career helping people write their resumes, build up their LinkedIn profiles, advise people on how to negotiate salaries, get promoted, help other women, work on their careers, because I believed in that impacting a person's bottom line. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I joined a nonprofit that was struggling a little bit at the time. We built it up to a 4,000 member nonprofit. We raised tens of thousands of dollars for it. And it is a nonprofit that focuses on education and training for anybody who wants it. And it's completely free right here in Austin, Texas. And during that time, what I realized is in 2008, 2009, even though Austin at one point had the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country during our recession here, there were many people who were highly educated, but they were still struggling to keep up with their mortgages. And I realized that, look, we as citizens and people that are work for a living, someone like me who gets up in the morning and goes to work and solves problems, large-scale problems for huge tech companies, we need to come together and we need to solve our problems. And this constant economic anxiety that people at all levels, just not just middle class or the bottom half of the United States, but many people who are affluent and even have a good education are struggling with being able to stay employed long term over their entire careers and being able to really provide a good living for their families, a good future for their children. And that's why I'm running for office, and my solutions focus on solving these basic bread and butter economic problems that every single American, not just in my district, but across the country is facing. And so that's why I'm running for office.
Thank you. So this is a good segue into something that's obviously been exposed by the pandemic, and there's a lot of talk about going back to school, but the broader gaps in our education system surely need to be addressed. Can you talk about some of your ideas to bridge these digital divide across communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the challenges that we found is that when we sent kids home, we found that kids in many parts of the United States, specifically in my district, in several rural parts of Texas's 31st district, which is Williamson and Bell counties, we have over 5,000 farms in this district. So there are large swaths of rural lands and small little towns in between. We found that kids in many of these areas didn't have access to high-speed internet. And so this left them with very little resources to be able to do research and have these interactive classes with their teachers. One of the things that we absolutely need to do is we need to take the best practices from universities that have successfully put together distance learning programs. So I'll give you an example. My alma mater is Purdue University, and Purdue Global has a very professional program on how they take the highest quality education that our country can provide in science and technology across this entire country to thousands and thousands of students. So we need to take these best practices and apply them to K through 12, because hopefully this pandemic is temporary, these stimulus checks are temporary, and these economic struggles of Americans are temporary. But the education and future of our children are not temporary. So we have to rise to this occasion. We need to put cellular hotspots in these areas where children do not have access to high-speed internet immediately. And we can react to this very, very quickly and ensure that they have access. So that's one of the things. However, long-term, we need to expand broadband access across our country, especially to rural areas. And here's one of the challenges that we as a country are facing. We've actually spent billions of dollars into internet companies to lay down the infrastructure to be able to bring broadband to every single part of our country. However, on many portions of these investments that our taxpayer dollars have done, have not been executed on and have not been delivered on. We absolutely have to hold these companies accountable and ensure that we expand on this. And this is where we can actually create, hundreds of thousands of high-paid jobs and bring, this broadband access everywhere. And we have an opportunity with 5G also here to ensure that we can do that. And one of the things that I'm proposing is that we take some of this funding for 5G, long-term funding, and then allow local municipalities to leverage that and put in infrastructure going forward. So it's really, really important for us to use our taxpayer funding effectively. And obviously we can see that this impacts the long-term growth and innovation in our country, because if we don't teach our kids, we're gonna be left behind with respect to the rest of the world, and we won't be able to keep our edge on innovation like we have been able to.
Thank you. So picking up on that, the link between both environmental justice, social justice, really speaks to your Equal Justice for All program. And so I also wanted to see if you could just talk a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, we're really proud of what we've put together in Equal Justice for All, and we're excited about it because this platform and the 2-page white paper that is available on my website, votefordonna.com, was actually put together by people in this district. So we collaborated with various groups, organizations, and individuals in this district to put this together. Today, our justice system has major challenges, and it wasn't just the George Floyd video that inspired us to write this. We had proposed Equal Justice for All way before this one video went viral back in mid-2019 when we launched our campaign. We see incidents, for example, in Fort Hood with Vanessa Guillen, who was brutally murdered, and her body was found, and she is a active duty military service member. We need to understand that there are major flaws in our justice system. We have stricter rules of engagement for people in war zones, for our military in war zones, than we have for police officers in our neighborhoods. And that's just completely illogical. As we saw, the entire country came together. We protested. We showed that we as American citizens are in pain over what is going on in our country. But what must follow that? We absolutely have to hold our law enforcement accountable. And it is important for mayors and city council members to come together and enact some of these. And it's a little bit bigger, and you can check it out, but I want to talk about a couple of things that we are specifically proposing. One is to ensure that police officers that have violated various different kinds of conduct that they're held to, that they must not be rehired into the next town, into the next city, into the next state, which is something that is going on. And even in George Floyd's case, we saw that multiple officers that were involved in his death had a lot of complaints against them in their behavior and how they were handling cases and how they were apprehending American citizens. However, none of these were acted on. So one of the things that we're proposing is liability insurance for police officers. And what that does is cities and towns and city council members would have to purchase liability insurance for police officers. And if for some reason that they violated their code of conduct, and they could, when they go to the next town, the next city, when that city tries to purchase liability insurance, they would be unable to insure them at a reasonable amount. Now, here's the interesting thing. This actually has precedence in our country. We see physicians take on liability insurance, and this has been enacted really well in being able to regulate that industry. So we need to take some of these best practices and put them into our legal system. The second thing I want to talk about is not just rehiring, but we have to restructure our justice system in our ultimate goal. What are we trying to do with our justice system? Is it just about punishment, or is it about being able to give people opportunities and rehabbing them and ensuring, how do we take down recidivism, for example, right? So we need police training and accountability that focuses on de-escalation. This is an extremely important part. So this is another thing that we propose in our Equal Justice for All. And I encourage you to look at that. The last thing I will say is that when we do have people who are exiting the justice system, that we have to have good solutions for rehabilitation. People need opportunities to be able to readjust back. People need skill sets to be able to go get a job and be taken care of, to take care of their families. We have these challenges, by the way, right in this district, where people say, I have a record, it happened when I was a teenager, and I am unable to find a decent employment, high wage job because of something that happened a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. And that's unacceptable. We have so many people trying to take care of their families, put food on the table, and we have to give them opportunities to be able to do that. And I believe we can do that. We're going to get it done. That's why I'm running, and that's what Equal Justice for All is all about.
Thank you. And I think next segue into this cleaner tech, but I think you really touched on it, is the opportunity and opening that up and addressing that, and that's part of the solution for equal justice. But I do want to turn to now specifically the topic of clean tech and continuing to make Central Texas a leader, not just in clean technology, but also against the fight against climate change, as I also know you're a strong advocate for there. So yes. One, how can we continue to do that? But then number two is, how do we get more citizens engaged in the process? And maybe some of your work prior can really help us do that, where it's not just about, obviously you want jobs and companies here, but we need an active citizenry in this process too, to really address climate change. So I'd love to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, so, this is a topic that is extremely close to my heart. My dad is an agronomist, and my mom is an environmentalist. I grew up gardening and, putting together vegetable gardens. I still grow peppers in my house. I'm extremely, happy to do that kind of stuff, being outdoors. So here's what we need to do. First of all, we need to diversify our energy sources. This is not just important for national security, but it is important to decentralize our energy resources. It's good for long-term reliability of our energy sources. Look, Texas is one of the largest producers of wind energy, if not the largest producer. But we need to recognize, what you had asked is, how do we get our citizens involved? And we need to understand this, that we have many engineers and many people that work in the oil and gas industry. But these people, just because that is their livelihoods, that doesn't necessarily mean that they believe that that is the best way to go about it. In fact, they are looking for opportunities to transition into clean energy. In order to get individuals energized and engaged, we have to provide educational opportunities for people to transition. We have to invest in technology, but also provide people who are in these industries to be able to be educated, understand what the opportunities are. And I have a background in the utility industry, as you know, right? I started my career in the smart metering business, developing meters that you find on commercial buildings. And I also worked in, some of the energy management software issues, right? Where the utility company is able to adjust your, a thermostat in your home by a degree or a half to be able to put in efficiencies, right? So this is something that's extremely close to my background, at least early on in my career. So we have a huge opportunity to do this transition, and we need to do it quickly because we are running out of time to mitigate climate change. And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to invest in jobs in this district, in these areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about green programs and what are the biggest things that are impacting. But to get to your focal point about how do we get citizens engaged, we have to put in programs and educational opportunities and innovation and entrepreneurship programs, which Texas, by the way, has been good at doing, but we need to accelerate them and we need to focus more on those areas. And that's how we engage, the average citizen. If we educate, if we inform, people will get involved. People will start their own programs and businesses to address these challenges that we have.
Thank you. So you talked about supporting the programs. So do you support some of the broader green stimulus programs? We've seen several come out over the past few months. Joe Biden has outlined some in his campaign. And also, do you have any other policy ideas in mind to help support the growth, renewable energy growth, maybe not just here in Texas, but nationwide as well?
Yeah, so we absolutely need to invest in innovation in this field, like I mentioned, but we need to scale some of our systems such as solar and battery storage technologies so that, as I mentioned before, that we need to decentralize. This improves reliability, for example, right, that I mentioned. It would also eliminate centralized points of failure. So if you have a decentralized system, you have a failure on one point, you have many other avenues to depend on for reliability of energy. And lastly, it would create millions of high-paying jobs as we transition our industry from oil and gas to more clean and renewable energies. One of the things that a lot of people are not aware of, and comes to the education piece, is that the biggest polluters and pollutants right now in our environment are coming from industrial fishing and industrial farming, right? We have more than 5,000 farms just in my district here in Williamson and Bell counties. And if we can invest in these areas and come up with sustainable farming and fishing technologies, for example, most of the plastic in the sea that we talk about actually comes from commercial fishing, not from plastic straws. And so we have to invest in fishing and farming practices. These are also good for our national security and reliability of our food sources for our country. And that is an area where we can innovate, we can create more sustainable jobs, and we can also mitigate for climate change and possibly also grow our economy in a big way. So those are some of the ideas that we have in our kind of climate program, but absolutely we have to focus on it, we have to make it intentful, and then we have to execute on it.
Thank you. And just to wrap up, two final questions. We have seen the rapid rise of your campaigning, and congratulations to you and your team. But maybe and maybe talk about just a few of those endorsements we've seen come in over the past few weeks there. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so just tell you a little bit about this race so that your viewers kind of understand where this is, right? Texas's 31st district starts in Northwest Austin, and it has all the large suburbs of North Austin: Round Rock, Cedar Park, Leander. It goes up to Georgetown, and that's Williamson County. There's also Hutto and Taylor. And then if you go north, you will hit Bell County, which is home to the largest armored vehicle military base in the entire country, Fort Hood. And we have Killeen, Harker Heights, and Belton and Temple up in Bell County. So that's Texas's 31st district. This district has grown extensively in demographics and the diversity of demographics. So Williamson County is one of the top 10 fastest growing counties in the entire country by percentage. And this has happened because of the growth of Austin from a sleepy little town to a big city. It's pushed a lot of people out from central Austin looking for a better life for their children, for better education for their children, into east, west, north, and south. And that's why this district has changed significantly. Now, right in this race, we had a dozen people running. Then we had 6 people on the ballot, but only 5 people running. And then we advanced to the runoff. But the interesting thing is, in 2018, Williamson County flipped blue. And the gap that needed to be changed to bring in new representation had to be closed in Bell County. So in the primary on March 3rd, our campaign won Bell County. And we did that by doing extensive outreach into communities that have never been asked for their vote. We continued this. And in the runoff, which we advanced to, we won the runoff by 13 points. And prior to the runoff, just 2 weeks before, we were endorsed by 2020 presidential, presidential candidate Andrew Yang. He really took our race and gave it a national introduction, to put it that way. And he and I really see eye to eye on real pay for all, which portion of that proposal, which I'm proposing for our country, focuses on not just wages, but if you work for a living, I believe that you should be able to pay for your living expenses. You should be able to save for a down payment on the American dream of owning a home, and you should be able to retire someday. And when I say paying for your living expenses, I mean you should be able to live where you work. And this is important because we have people who live in Bell County, young people that have to drive an hour and a half all the way to Austin for a decent paying job, yet they cannot afford to live. They have to drive back to live in Killeen or Harker Heights or somewhere else. And that's just unacceptable. And we can change this, by the way. And of course, I'm also a big proponent of UBI. I think UBI will accelerate entrepreneurship and innovation in our country like no one has seen before. And that's where Andrew Yang came in with his endorsement. He really believed in our campaign and we delivered on it with a win. And just yesterday, we were endorsed by the biggest voice for Texas here, 2020 presidential candidate, Secretary Julian Castro endorsed our campaign. He understands what it's going to take to solve these big problems. He understands that in this entire country, I'm one of those candidates, if not the only candidate, that's talking about scaling our healthcare infrastructure. That if we want to solve these big problems, we need to understand how to scale the solutions to these problems, something that I am uniquely qualified in doing, having brought products to market that are used by millions of people across the world, hundreds of millions of products have devices that I've worked on. So he understands that we need to bring this innovation and technology to our government. Today, we have a lack of this expertise in our government. But if we come together, we can solve these problems. So these are some of the exciting endorsements that are happening. And we have some more exciting stuff coming up also. So I think this is going to be one of the most exciting races. For those of you watching, it's only 2.9% from flipping blue. That's 8,000 votes. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is we had 65,000 people or more move into this district since 2018. We got 23,000 more people to come out and vote in the middle of a pandemic, in a runoff, okay, since 2018. That's the excitement we're creating, and that's what this race is all about, bringing solutions to American people, to my district, to things that solutions that really impact people's lives on a daily basis.
Well, thank you. That's exciting, and I'll put my hat in there too from the clean tech community. I am a strong supporter. We need big, brazen ideas, and I think obviously you have shown that, and that's why we're supporting you. I'm personally supporting you, and would really encourage all of our readers out there, especially in Central Texas, that really care about the movement in clean technology, to go out there and learn a little bit more about Donna's campaign. And Donna, where can we find more information about the campaign? Where can supporters go to get involved?
Yeah, so please go to our website, votefordonna.com. And please support us, because we can win this district, we can bring new representation, and we can do wonders for clean tech. I believe we need to do that. We need your help in 3 areas. So 1, we need donations. We need you to support us. So please, if you can, make a donation to our campaign. 2, if you can't make a donation, but you can spare time, please help us join our campaign, be a volunteer, help us reach out to voters so we can educate and inform them of our message. Every time we take our message to voters, they vote for us. So it's a wonderful opportunity to interact with people in our district and let them know that we have this amazing campaign that we're building on. And true change can only come when people demand it. I believe in this strongly, so we have to take our information to the voters. And lastly, please tell your friends and family about us. Post about us on social media. Let people know. We need to bring awareness, not just in my district, but across this country, about what we're trying to do. And I'll leave you with this one last thing. These problems are problems we can solve. I like to say that I am bringing the financial solution for what we Democrats believe is the morally right thing to do. We can solve these problems, and we can do them economically in a very smart way. And that's what our campaign is all about. So please join us.
Donna, thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate your time and your service to go out there and support the people of Texas. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for Jason having me.